Welcome to the Art of Balancing It All podcast, a podcast where we get real about the struggles of trying to balance it all from love, family, self-care, career, and entrepreneurship.
Every 2 weeks, we'll talk to dope guests who will give you the goods on how to succeed in this thing called life.
We are your hosts. I'm Pam Thompson-Smith, better known as The Firm.
And I'm Elijah Ellis, the ambassador of Buzz.
Hello. Welcome.
Hello.
Art of Balancing It All. I am Pam Thompson-Smith, also known as The Firm.
And I am Elijah Ellis, also known as the ambassador of Buzz.
Well, we're excited. So we're just going to jump on in with this conversation. You know, the recent events have taken place in our nation, particularly last week. So we're excited to unpack this conversation, the power of fearless conversations. This is going to be so powerful. We've got, of course, you know how we do. We got some dope friends, right? So they're here tonight and they're going to talk about these bold conversations about social injustices and help us kind of dissect this topic.
Yes. I'm so excited to introduce these two gentlemen who are in their own right. They have been outspoken about social justice, their support for the Black Lives Movement, and their thoughts on the responsibilities we all have to be outspoken, even when it may be uncomfortable to ourselves and our brand. So with that said, I am happy to introduce our first guest. He is a North Carolina State graduate and Raleigh-based multidisciplinary creative and community builder that's passionate about people, about design, and all the intersections in between. He is the AIGA Raleigh Chapter Director of Uniting People, a speaker and workshop facilitator where he covers topics from design and creativity all the way to stress and how we need to just let that go. As he puts it, he has a burning desire to collaborate and work for and with people who give a shit. I know him as a guy with a great an exceptional capacity to learn about others' life experiences, and who has taken on the really courageous task of being outspoken in order to educate family and friends and his network on social injustice. It is my pleasure to welcome the one and only my dope friend, Taylor Cashdan.
Hey, Taylor.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us. And next up, known as a collaborative connector, he is the founder of and chief connection officer of We Are Connected, founder managing partner of LTP Financial Partners, a financial service firm, and a co-founder of Shining Light in the Darkness, a nonprofit that focuses on sexual assault and domestic violence. Before venturing out into the entrepreneurial field, he had over 20 years of financial services experience and has worked for some of the largest financial services companies in the countries in various positions, such as Regional Vice President for Evergreen Investments, Senior Vice President for Wells Fargo Advisors, and Senior VP for a subsidiary of AIG. He is described as a servant leader, and I can attest to that, and is very active in the community where he serves on several nonprofit boards, such as the board VP of Swing Pals, interim board chair, executive committee for United Against Slavery, co-founder steering committee member of 100 Men Who Give a Damn, as well as director of diversity and inclusion for Financial Planners Association of the Triangle. We are happy to welcome Mr. Ed Dudley to the Art of Balancing It All. Welcome, Ed.
Welcome.
It's a pleasure to have you on.
You make me sound important.
When I looked you up, Ed, I did not go through your full credential list, and I feel so small compared to that whole list. And I'm like, I do a bunch of shit. Like, this is cool. And then I hear the list. I'm like, there's another one. There's another one. There's another one. Are you done yet? Are you done yet?
Taylor is a millennial, so he's just started. So we know once he gets where we
old man, Taylor.
You're on your way, Taylor. You are on your way. Well, we are just super excited to have both of you guys. You're amazing. You're dope. And we're just glad you're here for this conversation. This is a very, very important conversation. And so we're excited to have you on. But, this is the art of balancing it all. So what we like to do, we like to start off with just asking you, how are you? We do a wellness check. We've been doing it from day one. Before we dive deep into our conversations, let's, all kind of unpack how are we doing, especially now in the pandemic. So I'm going to start with you, Ed, and then I'll go to you, Taylor. But just, how are you doing? If no one's asked you today, how are you?
So today's a good day. And I like to tell people my favorite analogy is that of on a roller coaster. There's sometimes you're on a roller coaster and you're like, yay! And other times, oh my God. And that's how I've literally been since March. You throw COVID in and you throw in the social injustice. And it's been a roller coaster of emotions, but today is a good day, like Cube said.
That's good. That's good. What about you, Taylor?
I think that's a really good answer. I mean, I'm in a similar spot. I think it really is a day by day kind of scenario, right? And it's today. I agree. Today's a good day. I got to nap after work. I had chicken nuggets for dinner. Like, this is a good day, and the weather's nice. Like, and then we get to hang out with you guys. This is good. This is good.
Awesome. Well, that's good. We are excited to take a deeper dive into this conversation today. We're going to dive into the power of fearless conversation. So let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to start with what took place last night. We are fresh off of the first presidential debate. It was something we have never seen. I did not watch the entire thing. I only watched the reels. And it was funny to see anchors speechless afterwards where they could not talk. So I think it's fair to say it left many of us stunned. It left us exacerbated. It left us anxious. And one of the biggest moments from that debate that everyone has talked about is where the president refused to condemn white supremacy. And he even says, stand back and stand by to the Proud Boys, which is known as a white supremacist group. This is just one, though, of many times that the president has fueled the flames of divisiveness for the nation. He's emboldened racism. So, Taylor, I wanted to ask you, as a white man in America, could you give us a sense of how this divisive current president has sparked political and social conversations in your family and with your friends and your network? Has it created division? And if so, how are you handling all of that?
How much time do we have?
We have time. We have time.
I think what's been, when you try to back up out of it, look at like the 10,000 foot view, I think there's an interesting like anthropology lens that you put on this, right? Because I think, let's be clear, there's no world or way, shape, or form that I support this Cheeto of a man. But what is an interesting piece is like, I think it's his behavior has encouraged people to show their true colors. And there's a statement I think that resonates with me, and then it's kind of been a theme of this whole thing. It's like when someone shows you who they are, believe them, right? And I think it's hard when there's people in your life that you trust, you respect, you thought whose opinions were in line with yours or whatever, and you start to see like they're of a different nature, right? Or they're rooted in something that you vehemently disagree with. At some level, way, shape, or form. And it's a really hard thing to have to grapple with, because there's people I grew up with that I've been like, you support this person, like to their core, and then sure, could you argue that 4 years ago it was, well, I didn't like the other candidate. Like, all right, fine. But like, if you today still support this individual, like that's a different kind of commitment. Right. And I think there's a different kind of conversation happening now. And I mean, I've seen it just in my social circles of folks that voted for him for whatever reason then, and either still are supporting, which is baffling to me. And then there's many who have been like, okay, like I realized what I did, kind of thing. And it's those people, I think that's been interesting to watch, like seeing their growth of like, whatever caused them to choose to vote in that direction, when the opportunity came up, and how that's changed, right? And what their perception has been, and how their reality has changed, or better yet, how they've learned that maybe some of their opinions were rooted in falsehoods, or worse yet, levels of supremacy that they didn't realize existed or that affected them. Right? And I think it's been an interesting moment of growth for a lot of people. And like I said, from like that anthropology perspective, it's been really, I don't know, it fills that curiosity tank to kind of see how it's developing. And I think personally, in the beginning, that's a probably a bad phrase. I guess when the protests took off and it overwhelmed all of the social spaces, right? The first gut reaction was like, how do you become part of this and help push the narrative in the right direction, right? And it was very overwhelming because you didn't know where to go to, you didn't know what to listen to, where to hear from, and how to, quite frankly, get the truth of like what was happening on the ground. Forget about the narrative, but like to understand like what was happening to your friends and family that were literally in the street, right? And I think that you've got that vein of it, right? Then you've got the vein of the pandemic, and then you get the vein of the reality that this is not a new thing. We just didn't want to look at it before, right? And grappling with three things like that at once is quite frankly exhausting. But, you know, and I think it's a big wake up call for, I mean, people like myself, I guess, like I was never an activist, right? But I was always active in making sure that, like, you know, if you see something, say something kind of spiel, right? And like as a white dude, like I come with a lot of privilege into these conversations. Like I'm a guest in this space, and I'm very well aware of that. But I think it's important for people like me who you know aren't afraid to open their mouth to like be able to level up those who didn't have a voice before, right? Or be able to help deliver that narrative to the people that aren't listening, you know, because for whatever reason, we have a seat at the table and others don't. And sometimes you can't move over as easily as you want to. So in that case, you got to be the one to just be the puppet in the scenario and let the message come through.
Ed, did you have anything you want to say on to that? Add to that?
Where do we start with the man that occupies the presidency? It's well known that this man has, you know, multiple bankruptcies. The one that no one really talks about is how he's morally bankrupt. I'm sad that he sits in the office, but I'm not shocked that he sits in the office. Because if we go back 4 years when Mr. President Obama was in office, there was a segment of our population that hated it. And they were adamant that they're going to find somebody that's 180 degrees from Obama. And they did. I really want to invite President Trump to Toastmasters so he can learn how to speak well. But he's really shining the light on, you know, what we have really going on in our society. He's emboldened so many people. I watched the comedy show Saturday Night Live. Actually, it was Tuesday Night Live of the debate, and I laughed. I shook my head. I was saddened, and I wondered what people around the world that were tuning in actually really thought about what's going on with the United States. We used to be a beacon in the world.
Yes.
And now it's like they don't even want us in their countries now. You know, it's kind of crazy, but you know, it's been a crazy year. I saw something, somebody said 2020 should be a new cuss word instead of saying F 2020 you. You know, that's how crazy the year has been, but I'm surviving. I'm still here. One of the things that, you know, I like Taylor said, and I've been telling a lot of people, I'm not an activist, but I promise to be active.
Yeah.
And I get disappointed when I see people that have a platform and are not speaking up. You know, people, I don't care if you have a platform of one, you can influence one person and that can be a ripple effect. And they go out and influence 10 people. So I literally sat back on social media and the people that I followed, some of the pages that I followed, if they had nothing to say, especially with George Floyd, delete. I was deleting everything. I'm not an overly emotional man, but that whole thing with George Floyd hit me to my core. I cried almost every day for about a week. And I was thankful that my wife was gone away. She was gone out of town for a few days. And I'll never forget, I just couldn't sleep. I couldn't shut off the news. And I was flipping. I watched Fox, MSNBC, CNN. I watched all of it because I want to get a flavor from what everybody's talking about. I finally get up on May 30th, and I'll never forget that day. And I was so sad, and my soul was aching and hurting. Most of my network is Caucasian people. It's just the nature of the environments that I've worked in for many years in the financial industry. And I dropped a video on Facebook. And if you follow me or see anything on my stuff, I don't put videos out. And I literally got on it and I called out white people. I said, when are you going to take a stand? When are you going to speak up and say something? I dropped the video and I walked away from it and I didn't pay attention. I just went back and cried a little bit more. Didn't want to talk to anybody. My wife would call me and I'd put on a smile face. I'm fine. Hey, how you doing? All that good stuff. Sunday morning, my spirit just would not let me rest. It just rose up in me, and I put that video out on LinkedIn. And I'm wrestling with the spirit. I'm like, I ain't putting that on LinkedIn. That's not what you put out there. And it's like, yes, you are. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And it's like, yes, you are. So I finally put it out there. And I was shocked because within 15 minutes of me putting that video out, I got a call from a Caucasian gentleman that I've only known for 6 months. He picked up the phone, he called me on a Sunday. He's an attorney, and he said, "Are you okay?" That gave me hope that we can get past all this. The thing went somewhat viral. We got a ton of people viewing it, but it gave me an opportunity to have some difficult conversations and uncomfortable conversations with people across the globe. One of the groups that you brought up, I'm part of, called 100 Men Who Give a Damn. It's a philanthropy group that comes together just to raise money and give money to nonprofits. And we were having, because of COVID, we stopped doing a lot of stuff. And we got on a call, and there are, with the leaders, and there's 2 Black men, and the rest are Caucasian. And the other gentleman of color couldn't make it. So I'm sitting there, and as I was talking in my mind, I said, if they don't bring up anything in this conversation about what's going on in our society to people that look at me, I'm gone, I'm out, leaving the group. 20 minutes in, they hadn't said anything. And I'm like, I'm out of here. I'm like, I'm done. I was like, if you can't just acknowledge, you don't have to know what to say. If you just can't acknowledge, I'm leaving. And then one bold gentleman stood up and said, hey, and we're on a Zoom call, by the way. He said, wait a minute, what's going on, guys? We're talking about COVID, but we got 2 men of color that are part of our board, and we're not going to even ask them how they're doing. That meant the world because he stood up and he didn't have to.
Right.
And I was mad and I was upset because when they called on me to talk, I literally started crying with I think there was 10 guys on the line. I started crying on the Zoom call in front of these guys. I'm like, now I'm mad because I'm like, I can't stop the tears. So I got all emotional. I'm like, you don't know our struggles. You don't know our stories. I was like, I could have been a hashtag. I've had all my different experiences. When I got off the phone, I was mad. I'm like, what the heck? I'm sitting here crying in front of these guys. They don't need to see that part. But I was encouraged because that one gentleman that stood up, we had a very difficult conversation. And I was encouraged so much from him because he sat down. He's like, I need to sit down and talk with you. And we went somewhere and we sat down and talked. And he just shared his heart. And he said, I got 2 kids and I want my kid growing up in a world that's acting like this. So between his conversation and some other conversations, I'm hopeful that there's a better day around the corner once we get this guy that spends $70,000 on that fake hairpiece out of the office. So, we got a lot that we can talk about and unpack, and this conversation go on and on. But I want to say publicly in front of everybody, thank you. Because we need people that look like you standing up and speaking out.
Yes.
That's where the change starts to happen, when people that look like you come out and speak. We've been talking, we've been marching, we've been saying things for years. But until people that look like you, in particular white males, start speaking up, that's when the changes going to start happening.
Yeah.
That's good. That's real good. That's Ed, that's a great segue into the next segment or the next question. that I want to ask and talk to you and Taylor both about as we continue to talk about 2020 and what's been happening and how powerful it has been for the Black Lives Matter movement, as you talked about George Floyd, and then we could talk about Brianna Taylor, and unfortunately we could talk about so many because it's way too many, right? With these injustices. So one thing we want to ask is, I think Taylor said it well, see something, say something. So, when is it, or how do we say something? Like people in the workplace, people in corporate, with the question of should I speak up? So maybe some people didn't say anything because they wanted to, but they were afraid, so I want you guys, especially you First Ed, to really talk, because I know you have strong views on that, thoughts on, why we should share. Or when should we share, and how does that affect, the bottom line at work? And then I have another question for you, Taylor, along with.
The reality is every company's bottom line is one of the biggest consumers are African Americans. And, we think about the boycotts from the civil rights movement. What did they do? They shut the buses down. If we could ever really, truly come together, we could literally shut America down if we really together as a united front. Yeah. But I think it's always a good time to have the conversation. I've had so many white people reach out to me, Ed, I don't know what to say. I'm like, that's okay. But you reached out. What's on your mind? Let's talk. Let's unpack some stuff. I don't have all the answers. I am not an expert in race relations, civil rights, or any of that, but I'm willing to have a conversation. And I think it's a time for a friend of mine is putting a movement together called We the Willing. It need to be willing to have that uncomfortable conversation with someone that doesn't look like you. We have a lot of people that, white people say, oh, I got Black friends. Really? Do they know what the inside of your house looks like? Have you ever sat down at your dinner table? You invite them for a cookout?
And you bring up an interesting point. I think it's worth mentioning. I mean, there's a I don't want to say a group of people. There's a vein of thought of like, but how do I reach out without it being overburdening, right? Or offensive, or that person's having to now carry the weight beyond what they would normally do, and now educate white people, right? Why should I add to the burden that they're already carrying, right? It's a common theme you hear from people. So I think it's worth pointing out too that what you're getting at is, at the end of the day, silence is a response just as much as reaching out in the first place, right? And I think that's a theme there. But I think what would probably be, reassuring, helpful, whatever you want to call it, to white people is I think the encouragement of reach out to your friends, to your people, to your colleagues, to your coworkers, whatever, right? I mean, I think that's the center point there, even if it feels like you don't know what to say, right? Yeah. That's kind of the vein of what you're getting at.
Yeah. It's okay not to know what to say. I've had so many people out to me and says, Ed, I do not know what to say. There's nothing that I can really say, but I just wanted to know I'm here. And that's when I'm like, well, let's talk. What are you feeling? What are you thinking? And then we start having some meaningful dialogue. And there's conversations that we've never had before. And I want to put this out there real quick because you talked about the Black Lives Matter. I want to make it clear to everyone: Black Lives Matter is not synonymous with Black Lives Matter, the organization. Hear me clearly. I fully support Black Lives Matter. I don't support the organization per se. And what I've seen, so many white people, I got to call it like it is, are saying, "Oh, I can't support Black Lives Matter." Why? Because they're trying to mingle it with the organization, and the organization has some interesting views that I don't necessarily support because of my views, but I wholeheartedly believe that our Black Lives matter. The Black Lives Matter of my children and my grandchildren matter. And I'll say it every day, all day long. If you don't like it, oh well. Yeah. We have Black people have had this emotional tax that we've been paying for years, that we can't truly show up as our authentic selves in a lot of spaces. I refuse to carry that and pay that tax anymore. You're going to either like me or you're not going to like me. I'm okay with it now. I'm older. I've done a lot of stuff, been through a lot of things.
Mhm.
I'm okay now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna show up proudly. You see me do this? You don't like it?
Yes.
Turn around and leave.
Yeah, yeah. I think there is a balance. So what Taylor is talking about is there is this point of exhaustion that we have where we are exhausted in just being able to maintain our mental sanity at this moment. And so there's a part of us that we don't want to then take on the education of you. But I think there is something to be said about the power of conversations and then you taking the responsibility to continue to educate yourself.
Yeah.
And that's where we're not being clear. We're willing to have the conversations, but you have to take on the task to have another conversation, to read a book, to educate yourself on the history. And I think that's where we need to be very clear, because I have taken on a task at my job to educate, for instance, what Ed talked about, when we walk around and we have to be someone else. So I've educated my colleagues on that. I've never truly felt that I could be my authentic self. And Taylor, as you know, depending on the job, you really can't feel okay in being your authentic self. So I think if you're willing to have the conversations and then go on and press on to the next level, and not just have that one conversation and say, whew, I did it, I've done my job. That's where the problem lies for me.
Well, we're not in a time of history where the information isn't out there either. I mean, you could literally
Right.
consume it on any channel in any, like, you want to talk about 15, 20 years ago? Okay, maybe it was harder to find content, right? Like
Yes.
maybe. But like
Yes.
today, you could turn on Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, Google Plus, like any streaming service that all of us have, and we're stuck in the house anyway, right?
Mhm.
There's books upon books upon books, not to mention the human element that we're talking about today, right? Being able to actually talk to people. So I think there's an excuse, right? Like there is no boot camp to understanding Black people. It's not a thing. Like it's not like in 2 weeks you can get everything you need to know. Like that's not a thing.
Yes. Yes.
You know, it's an ongoing change of perception. It's and I think it comes down to, I think the one of the baseline things is like you have to be as a non-person of color, like you have to be ready to be wrong. Like it's okay if you learned the wrong thing and didn't know till now, but like when you change your perception, like you're just becoming a better human being. Like you have to be, and that goes with anything. Like be ready to be wrong. Like it's okay. You can learn new things every day.
You gotta be open. You gotta be open-minded. You know, you got so many people that are just closed-minded. It's like, oh, I've been this way for 40 years. Well, that's not right. You know, be open to having a conversation. I tell people there are days that I'm just exhausted and I'm mentally just tapped and I don't want to deal with it. But if one of my white friends reaches out and wants to have a conversation with me, it's my obligation for me, I'm just speaking for me, to have that conversation with them, because I don't know how difficult it was for them to pick up the phone or send me a message. So I want to reach out and say, all right, well, what can I help you with? What can we talk about?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we just need more conversations. And then, you know, from the conversations, now we need to put a lot of stuff into action, because we've been having conversations a lot from a global, but now we're having down at the micro level, but we need to put a lot of stuff in action. And I'm optimistic that companies, individuals, organizations are starting to put some action behind their words.
Yeah, I agree.
That's true. Okay, so next we want to talk about, that's good, Ed, you were talking about like lots of people are having the conversation. So we have celebrities having the conversations now actively, which is very powerful. But what we want to ask you, so what should the outcome be toward the conversation? So what comes after the understanding? So we're having the conversations, you got everybody getting involved, all celebrities, everyone, you know, and that's what we want. Bring attention to the issues and the injustices. But what's next? What comes after the understanding?
True equity. Mm-hmm. True equity. You know, Kim Jones, a young lady that after the riots, she had one of the best quotes. And she said, they are lucky that Black people are looking for equality, not revenge.
Right.
And that's all we're asking for, some equality. You know, you look at You look at Fortune 500 companies. How many people are of color in the C-suite? How many people are color on the boards? You know, it's like that glass ceiling. You can get just high. You'll get into a leadership role, but we don't want you in the C-suite or on some of the boards. Equity and, you know, make us feel belonged. You know, we hear a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but we don't hear a lot about belonging. Yeah, I'll bring you to the table, you know, but yeah, you sit at the table. Don't speak. We don't really value your opinion, but we need equity. And, you know, we built this country for free.
Yeah.
You know, the whole reparations thing. How do you do that? There is a way that it can be done if they really wanted to do it. It's a very divisive subject, but how do you repay people that built the country, have suffered from PTSD for generations with no help, and every time we turn around, it's something else. So how do you repay us? You know, so I wish I could say I had all the answers for that question, and that's a question I think a lot of us are grappling with. I think it just comes down to true equity and a little bit of everything that we're doing. You know, people talking about, oh, give me a seat at the table, and I love how Tyler Perry said, well, y'all wouldn't give me a seat, so I built my own table.
That's right.
Well, sometimes, you know, sometimes we need some help at the table. You know, there's a lot of gatekeepers. You know, I remember in corporate America, you know, I didn't really have a mentor for years. And then one guy reached out to me to mentor me. And when he helped mentor me, I started watching my career go like this in corporate America. What are you doing to reach back to try to mentor someone or help someone along the way? You know, a lot of my white colleagues had, you know, their daddy's friend at the club. Oh, hire my son. Oh, great. No experience. But we just brought him. You brought him in. You know, we need access. So give us equity, give us equality, give us access. The rest. But I don't think as people of color, we're asking for too much. You know, and I will say that I got two strong sisters right there. You're marginalized even more.
Yes.
That's why a lot of these companies, corporations, have women leading their diversity, equity, inclusion segments. Why? Because they hit two targets: a woman and a minority. I think that's sometimes disingenuous, but
you're putting it lightly. I think there's a level of bullshit that they're feeding each other. Of going, okay, you know what? We need a D&I squad, and we're just going to put a black woman there because, you know, we'll have it, and then we'll put them on LinkedIn and say we're doing something. Yeah, I think there's a lot of groups that have done that for years, and there's a lot of groups that are doing that now because they feel like they have to respond. And it's
if you look at it, if you go back and peel it back, most diversity and equity inclusion programs at companies, they don't work.
Yes,
they got the role, and they've had the role for years. What have you done? You maybe diversify the low rank and file, like if you're at a bank, the tellers, the service level. What have you done from the C level? Like I got so angry the other day, the CEO for Wells Fargo, and I worked for Wells Fargo and their predecessors for 14 years. The CEO was talking about, well, there's a lack of quality talent pool. And I'm sitting here like, did you really just say that? Because I know a lot of African Americans that are still working at the company right now. One gentleman in particular off the top of my head that should be in the C-suite and on the operating committee. You're tone deaf. I don't even want to hear a lack of, you know, quality. There's a ton of us that right here. I got a friend right here. He owns a car dealership. He built that because he couldn't get a space at the table. He said, let me go out and do my own thing.
I think tone deaf is a good way to describe it, but I think it's also fear, right? Because I think people seem to think that like that is giving up their spot, right? And that's not. You can move over on the bench. You don't have to get off the bench, right? And it's actually better if you move over, right? Because then you get to bring someone up the ladder with you. You can help them understand the construct of the world they hadn't navigated yet, and then they can bring all their new and fantastic insights into the picture, and it becomes a better place to be.
You hit a key point, Taylor. It is fair. What's happening is, and I'm just going to call it like it is, white men are fearful because they're losing their grip and the power that they've had for generations, founding fathers, they're losing their grip. They're seeing that our society is getting more diverse. They're seeing women are rising to power across the board. And I had to tell a couple of white women, I'm like, this country really wasn't built for you either. You didn't get a chance to vote. What I think was it 1920 that white women got an opportunity to vote. This country wasn't built for you either. So, I mean, wake up. And they are scared to death that their grip on power is slowly going. They know that their sons and their grandsons are not going to walk into these cushy positions. It's going to be a woman or someone of color. It's just a matter of time. And the demographics are changing, and they don't like it.
I'm so glad that you guys brought up fear, because fear comes in many forms. It can be race, it could be sexuality. And I remember being a teen, this is going to our next question, and having more liberal views than my dad about homosexuality. And we had some intense debates. I would call them arguments, just arguments. And I was passionate largely because I had friends who were LGBTQ. I had more information. And now, as you talk about fear, this older generation versus this younger generation, and there are adults who often find it hard to even talk about race, but the kids today, maybe not so much, right? So social media has opened up their world. They have different friends, they have different networks. So here they are with this very passionate view about how they're thinking about race and how they identify in these times. How do you think they can make an impact? Folks that we just talked about who are so stuck in fear that they cannot seem to get out of their own ways. How do they approach the conversation of racism when it's such a diverse view?
I'll let the young man go ahead and start on that one.
I think it's important to point out, so I'm a millennial, right? And I was nervous about Gen Z when they started that Tide Pod nonsense. I was like, we are screwed, right? There's no one to pass the mantle to, right? And I have been happily surprised to see how active and opinionated and empowered the people that are younger than me. I'm only 28. The people that are younger than me are. The fact that these kids are shutting down Twitter, right? The common place for the current president to vent his views, right? That they are wrecking these lines of communication from their couches, right? While also navigating Zoom calls. That's now their school life. There's so many things that my generation was stuck in that, we didn't have the internet, then all of a sudden we had it, and then we learned it, and now we're kind of the experts-ish, right? And then we had to show our parents because they had no idea what it was, and then our younger siblings were born into it, right? So we're in that weird spot, but this new generation, they're born with the phone in their hand, right? They know this connectivity and the power of it from the jump. So I think number one, they're exposed to way more information than any generation previous has ever been exposed to, just by sheer connectivity, right? So you talk about that as a baseline, where you have older folks that are often set in their ways because it's all they know, right? Any challenge to that rocks their foundation to the point where they can't handle even a small. And what's interesting is you can, if you take it's hard, but if you abstract the issue out of it, right, and think about the construct of if you take out a big stone of foundation from someone's life, right, it makes sense that they'll crumble, right? So when you think about it like that, it is a huge change. It's a necessary change, obviously, but it's a huge change for them to even conceptualize understanding. But I think that's the interesting tweak there is you've got literal generations of divide where some are just at the point of nope, what I know is what I know, and I'm not willing to even allow new information in. You've got a generation in the middle that's I know I have to let new information in, but I'm trying to question where it's from to make sure it's valid, but I want to be on the right side of history, right? And then you've got the youngest generation that's fuck that, we're going to find the information we need, and we're just going to destroy everything else in our way because this is what needs to be done. Right. I think it's very interesting to kind of watch how this is evolving and advancing. And especially, like I said, with the whole connectivity aspect, the access to information, and just the sheer will of wanting to do that. No one has, this isn't a parent telling the kid, it's time for you to get on Twitter and shut it down. They're no, this is wrong. Like
Mhm.
as a tween, right? They're recognizing the craziness that
They are.
people are having to go through to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And that in itself is like an evolution of the brain. Like that's a new thing, right? That's something we haven't encountered before. We're like at that young age being able to just conceptualize right and wrong in such a binary way, right? And then double down no matter what your parents feel, what your teachers feel, what your friends feel, right? Where in the past it may have been like, I don't want to be different from my friends, so I'm gonna, fit in the box, right? They're like, hell no, I'll go find new friends. No problem. I can connect to everybody. Like this is easy, and that's I think really inspiring.
Yeah.
I love these young kids. I absolutely love it. So I got hooked on TikTok, and it's bad. I'll go down this rabbit hole on TikTok, and I'll just sit there and laugh all day.
It is a dangerous rabbit hole.
It's horrible. I'll be kidding. I'm just sitting on TikTok.
I thought you meant you were doing the TikToks.
This is not the after-hour show.
Oh, that's right.
So Taylor talked about how they went on Twitter. I love how they went on Twitter, bought all the tickets for Trump's rally, and he thought, "Oh, we sold all these tickets," and no one showed up because all these kids had just jammed them up bad. I'm like, "Wow, that's amazing!" And then I get on TikTok, I see these young kids calling out their parents, for their views on everything. I will tell you, my views have evolved on a lot of things, and even the last 5 years on how I see things. But to see these young kids say, you know what, you're wrong. Racism wrong. If you're voting for Trump and he says this and you're cheering and all that, you're a racist. And I'm looking at, I'm like, ooh. I'm like, well, first of all, I couldn't talk to my mom and dad like that, but that's a whole nother conversation. But I'm watching them just constantly go back. And what I think these politicians are missing is that these young kids are now at the age where a lot of them can vote. There's a huge, no one in the news is talking about it. None of the politicians are trying to reach out to them. These 18 to 25-year-olds, no one's trying to reach them. They're tired of the bull crap. They're tired of the sexism, the racism, the genderism, all the isms. They're tired of it. They just want to get along with everybody. Well, I got blue friends. I got gay friends. I got this. Well, I mean, my personal views on the LGBTQIA plus community has changed over the last 5-10 years. How I see them.
Yeah.
And then these kids are now embracing a little bit of everybody. And our future. And I'm excited about these young kids and what they're doing. At 19, I wasn't paying attention to politics.
Nope.
I was out doing my thing. I'm out having fun. I'm not thinking about it, but I'm watching these kids. They had a young girl on, they did an interview that sat and watched the whole debate. She's like, I'm just now able to vote. And she was very articulate in her views. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
At 18 years old, I know what I was doing. And it wasn't sitting here watching a debate.
Yes.
I think they realize what's at risk.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's a huge factor, too. Because if you think about like when Obama was being elected into his first term, I didn't vote. I mean, I was like, oh, whatever. What do I need to be part of this thing? Like, I remember sitting at home watching the polling numbers, with my buddies just like drinking every time we'd see one of the votes come in. Like that was it was a game to us, right? We didn't understand what it was doing. We didn't care. It wasn't a thing. But, and you could argue that a lot of the similar issues are on the table than they were now. But, I don't think I willingly didn't care. I just didn't know I needed to. Right. Yeah. And that's a scary thing when you think about that. And I didn't know that I didn't know, there's that weird piece too. But I think kids realize today, and I'm calling them kids, I think is a discredit to their intelligence to a certain extent. These young adults, they realize what's happening. They can see the world quite literally burning in some places around them. They see how the response to the coronavirus is wrecking families. They see how people are being shot down in the street. Black people are being shot down in the street with no repercussion. They see how this Brianna Taylor case was ridiculously handled and all this new transcript coming out. Exactly. And they're doing what they can within their means to be vocal about it at the moment, whether it's TikTok, whether it's joining a protest, whether it's shutting down an Eventbrite on Twitter. They're doing what they can instead of being asked to, right? And I think that's a huge piece there that like my generation didn't have, because either we didn't know better or things weren't on fire enough, right, for us to feel like we needed to. I don't know what it was, but the new generation's got something, and whatever they is, I hope they don't lose it, because there's a factor to this too, that like there's an exhaustion level. Like there's a I read an article recently that called it surge capacity. That in this last 8 months, like we're in decision fatigue, right? Between all of the many issues that are happening every day, like our brains are done. Like there's a small tank for this kind of like surge capacity where like disaster happens, you can respond to it, it passes, right? We're not built for this kind of ongoing stuff.
Trauma.
And not to mention the compounding nature of it, right? And then the multiple spokes of it. Like if it was one issue at a time, you know, you could probably swallow it and move on with your day. But we've got so many things happening all at once. Like I'm relatively convinced that if we didn't have all this at once, there wouldn't have been that many protesters in the street, right? Because people would have been distracted by their day jobs and their social lives and all this stuff. Like we were forced to watch what was happening.
I think coronavirus helped some of that because it caused a lot of us just to sit still.
Yeah.
Now we're constantly on the computer, on the TV, and now we're sitting still. Whereas before we were just moving. We're moving and shaking, Now, but we all had to sit still. And now we're seeing all this stuff transpire in real time. Constant news feed.
Yes.
And I was like, whoa, it's like overload for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
That's right. You are watching or listening to The Art of Balancing It All, and we have some dope guests, and we are talking about the power of fearless conversation. And that's what we're having right here tonight, a fearless conversation. So we're almost done, but we want to talk about a couple other things. So we talked about, as Taylor mentioned, and Ed, you talked about what we're seeing, young and old, real time, what we're seeing. So after all the things that we're seeing, all the things that are going on in our country, what do you think America needs to do beyond all this divisiveness? What do we do to get back on track to heal?
First of
all,
we know the first one.
But I think it's beyond that. I think once we get him out of office, we need to correct all the cronies that followed him out of office. I'm a huge proponent for term limits for our Congress and House.
Preach.
Yes.
We need to fix that, because you're sitting in, I look at Mitch McConnell and some of these other people, and even on the Democratic side, you're sitting in for 30, 40 years.
Yes.
And I look at the state
of
a
congressman to be bought.
People, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. They need to be gone. But once he's gone, I think we need to continue having personal conversations, getting connected with our fellow man, people that we work with, people that we see on a regular basis, having conversations other than, hey, how you doing? How was your weekend? Oh, let's have some real conversations. How are you mentally feeling? I love how you guys started this segment. How are you feeling mentally? Because that's one of the things I asked you off camera. How are you guys feeling mentally?
You did. You did. Thank you.
This is like a lot of this stuff is just taxing, but we need to get it out. Because if you leave all that stuff inside you, it's like poison. And it was literally, there's research talking about certain things will cause cancer. There's stress and all that stuff. So we need to get a lot of that stuff out. And we have a lot of stuff we need to get out. And there's individuals that look like Taylor. There's things that they need to get out. I mean, if I was a white man, I'd probably be like, oh, I'm tired of hearing some of this stuff too. And let's just be honest. I'd probably say that, but I'm not. I don't know what the experience is of a white man. I can only speak about my experiences. But we need to have conversations. We need to come together. I'm a man of faith, and I'm never going to shy away from my faith. One of our biggest issues we have is on Sunday mornings. The most segregated day of the year. Of the week.
Yes.
We need to figure out a way to come together on Sunday mornings. Let's cross-pollinate churches. Let's find a church that's predominantly white and a church predominantly black, and cross-pollinate services. That's one of the things that we need to do, because I have a problem with our evangelical brothers and sisters that are supporting Trump.
Yeah.
It's because a lot of them are not having conversations with us.
Yeah.
But I think, we need to have these fearless conversations, these uncomfortable conversations, and continue to have them with our neighbors. I mean, I grew up in a neighborhood that we knew all of our neighbors. These days, people don't know, really, and keep it moving.
That's all of us.
Who are your neighbors that don't look like you? And Karen, stop calling the police on us. Put laws in place that truly penalize them. If you call the police on someone just standing while being Black, I probably wouldn't videotape that, by the way. I'm just letting y'all know. So I see 3 of y'all. Y'all my friends and family now. If y'all just know I'm downtown, please put some bail money and something help a brother out. But we need to just continue to have the conversations. But like I said, I'm hopeful because I love the young kids and people, because if you look at their friends are truly a melting pot.
Yeah.
Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, straight, gay. I mean, their friends are truly a melting pot. Mm-hmm. So that's why I remain optimistic. I'm a little older, probably. I think I might be a little older than all of y'all. I'm sitting there. I got 4.5 grandkids. You gotta leave me alone.
I did not know that.
Wait. How do you get a half a grandkid?
I'm hopeful for it. I think people my age and above, a lot of them they're stuck in their ways, and I don't think we'll change a lot of them that much. I think we'll get them just to pay attention, but not really move off their ways a little bit. But to people like Taylor and some of the other people that I know that are doing great things and having the conversations and not letting the conversation die, because at first the conversation was going to die. I thought the protest was going to die. I thought but they kept going. They haven't. Everybody's still having these conversations. You're seeing stuff pop online all the time, and I listen to as much as I can because I want to learn as much as I can. But I'm optimistic about our future for my grandkids, and even to my kids that are younger, because they are much better than a lot of us my age and above.
I agree. And as this is the last question, and as we go out, because I love that you brought up how much stress all of this is causing us. So for those who have been listening, who have been hesitating to have those conversations, who have been hesitating to share their views, who need to release it because the trauma now is inside, what do you want to say to them to encourage them to speak up and not be shy and have the dialogue that will take us to the next level?
Go ahead, Taylor. I talked a lot last time.
I mean, I'm gonna default back to my answer from earlier. Silence is just as much an answer as saying something. Mm-hmm. And I think people take that for granted. I think not knowing it's easy. It's better to say something wrong and correct it, right, than it is to not say anything at all, especially right now. And I think the idea of so we kind of kicked off the conversation talking about influence, right, and your network and that kind of thing. I think people don't often people often look at like someone with like, I'm just gonna make up some like 50,000 followers, right, and like, oh, that person needs to be outspoken because they've got the reach, right, which is true. Sure, they should be, but you with your 5 followers or people that you talk to or coworkers, whatever. It's just as important, because even if you're not changing it, someone like one of those 5 people's minds, but you give one of those 5 people reassurance that they're heard, like I would argue that's more important than you're not going to change a racist mind by yelling at them on Facebook, but you will give your friend a little bit of hope if you can tell them like, I hear you, like I may not understand, but I'm willing to learn, right? I think that is like the undertone that's just gone like unacknowledged, right? That to me is more important than the educator racist kind of route that often is the easier one, right? Let me repost this thing, someone will see it, right? We often forget that we're in echo chambers, right? None of that stuff permeates to the people that really need to be reading it, right, or seeing or hearing it or whatever. So in that case, pivot, right? Be the support, be the shoulder someone can stand on, instead of being the source of change. Like you don't have to take that burden on yourself and then burn yourself out, or even be doing the wrong thing. Like latch on to someone who's doing it already, right? I think that's an important thing. Like learn where your lane is and how you can help. I think what's interesting is like the creative community has a very unique responsibility right now. And I think there's a few veins in which I say that. The first of which is I think we often forget that we have a lot of power by the work that we do, right? We're the ones making things that people consume, that distill messages from. And I think there's a lot of responsibility in that, right? You can't be putting out shit that's going to be misinterpreted, that has the wrong message, that goes against your personal values, whether you're asked to do it from your job or not. And that's a hard discussion to have, but move companies. We've all done it. There's plenty of creative work out there. I don't want to hear that there's not enough jobs, because that's bullshit, especially in the creative space. There's a million companies looking for designers right now. Yeah, it may not be at your pay rate, but it's better than being with a racist job. Yep. So that's a side thing. But I think we often take for granted that we're not only making these things, but we forget how impacted we are by the stuff around us, right? I think there's what's the word I'm looking for? There's a lens we as creatives put on that we think we're impervious to thwarting our thoughts, right? For example, like, I make the things, therefore I acknowledge how it'll permeate into my brain, right? You're not realizing how much subliminal stuff by the art, by the design, by the content, by the video that's around you, that's impacting the way you think, the way you communicate, the way you breathe, even if you're the one making the stuff. And I think it takes a certain kind of person to step back and go, okay, just because I'm the one that's stirring this cauldron, it doesn't mean the fumes aren't affecting me, right? And I think you need to as a person in the creative space, whether you're a marketer, a content writer, a video person, a designer, doesn't matter. Like, take that pause of going, all right, let me make sure that what I'm consuming is also, helping what I'm putting out, right? And then use that skill set to empower others. There's tons of other organizations that have a good message, but a miserable aesthetic, right? Or don't know how to deliver, or don't know how to upload a video, right? You don't have to be the one creating the content, writing the script. You can literally be the person that pushes the publish button, and that's contributing, right? Take that responsibility, that weight, that lack of knowledge away from the people that need it, and lend your time to help folks do what needs to be done. And I think that's the vein where, like, people like me can really be helpful without taking the microphone away from people that should have it.
I would just say this. We've all been fearful of something at one point in time. And I want, if somebody's listening to this, just to reflect the time that you were afraid of something and you overcame it. And you probably sat and it's like, oh man, I should have done this a long time ago, like swimming. Oh, I should have done. Same thing with the conversation. You might be afraid to have a conversation, but once you jump in, you be like, oh, I'm glad I did this. I should have done this a long time ago. So don't let fear stop you from having a conversation or reaching out to someone. And I will always tell you, it's okay to just pick up the phone. Ed, I don't know what to say. I just want to let you know that I'm here. TT, Pam, Taylor, I don't know what to say. But if you want to just talk, you want to vent, I'm here. That goes a long way. I will forever, and I'm going to give him a shout out right here. His name is attorney Michael Berger with NC Planning. He was the first to call me after he saw that video. And he said he had to walk away, and he said, but I had to call you. If I never talk to him ever again in life, I will always remember him, and his name will always resonate with me, and I will always share that story with someone. He had no idea what to say. Let me know that he was there for me. That goes a long.
Yeah. And we have to do better to destigmatize, like, that anxiety that person was feeling before calling you is completely normal.
Yeah.
Right. And we have to understand that that's not a failure on the part of the person. And this is devoid of whatever's going on in the world. Like, these anxieties people feel about not knowing what to say, not knowing where to say it or how to say it is very normal. Whether you have people on the stage speaking or on a video or on a podcast like we are today, like, I had anxiety coming into this. Like, we were like, yeah, screw it. We don't need a script. And then when I got on the call, I was like, I have no idea where this conversation is going to go. But there's nothing wrong with it. Like, and that's, I can say that as like an extroverted person. Like, I thrive in this kind of weird stress. Like that's like it burns the good fire. But I think there's a lot of people who feel the complete opposite of that, and that is completely fine. But it's worth going. There's a construct in cognitive behavioral psychology called the ruler framework, where it's an acronym where when you're feeling something like that, like R is for recognize, like recognize you're feeling funky, right? You have to understand what caused it, right? I'm feeling uncomfortable because I don't understand what it's like to be a Black person, right? L is to label it, right? This is anxiety, right? I know what it is. I know what I can do about it, or I think I know I can do about it. I'm forgetting the E. It's like engage. I think I'm gonna butcher this, but it's like figure out how to fix it. Right, is kind of where it's going. Do something to adapt to get rid of that feeling, and then the last R is reflect. Right, how do I avoid this feeling in the future? Right, so if I'm feeling anxiety because I don't know how to approach Ed or TT or Pam about a weird subject, like I need to log that as a problem internally. Right, write it down, journal it, whatever, and then get past it. Otherwise, you're gonna be stuck there, and that's being stuck there is that silence we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Right. And that is far more dangerous than you facing your anxiety, your fear for that small moment, because the impact of that phone call, Ed, like you're talking about, is now way more important than the tiny fear that your friend felt before picking up the phone.
Yes. Yes. Thank you guys so much.
Amazing.
And you made me, I'm going to have to shout out Taylor first for checking in on me, Mike Dancel, one of my friends, Michael Solomon, and Elizabeth Romero, all of which went past the fear and reached out to have a conversation. So thank you so much for joining us. This is The Art of Balancing It All. For our audience, make sure to visit our website, theartofbalancingitall.com, where you can join our tribe and subscribe to the show, which is available on Podbean, iTunes, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Be sure to subscribe so you'll never miss a show.
Never, ever, ever. Also, be sure to follow us on social media at The Art of Balancing It All on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you love the show, please let us know. Leave us a rating so we can continue to bring you amazing episodes with amazing, dope guests like tonight. Thank you for listening.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks for having us.
Great.
Thank you.
That's good. Okay.
That's real good.